So we're going to talk about copyright in the Creative Commons today. And if you don't know what the Creative Commons is, don't worry, that's exactly what you're going to learn this month. So I will say before I get started that my slides are pretty text heavy this month, just because I copied a lot of information from copyright law to try to tell you about copyright. So there's a lot of text on some of these slides, which I usually don't do, but I wanted you to see this information. So you're forewarned before we get started. But first you may wonder, why do we want to talk about copyright with you? And the big reason are my 2 bullet points here. What does it mean to have content so accessible in today's world? And what does it mean when you're a content creator? And I want you to think about today's world and how we access information. We access so much information online, and it is so easy to copy and paste or download or right-click. However you do it, it's so easy to get access to information. So what does it mean when we are just taking an image online without even thinking about who is the copyright owner? And what if that was your image? What if you took a picture, you have your own blog, you put it there, you all of a sudden see your picture somewhere else when they didn't ask for permission? What does that mean to you? Does it bother you? That is your copyrighted picture. So I want you to think of those types of things. What does it mean to have content so easily accessible? That we need to be aware of the copyright of that information, and we need to teach our students that as well. And they are growing up in this world. They are used to having easily downloadable information online. So I want you to think about these things as I go through this discussion on copyright. And then another thing you want to think about, especially when it comes to making your assignments for students, is when we talked about plagiarism proofing assignments. We did that in August and September, where we talked about the LPPs, the low probability of plagiarism assignments. And it just can help students make something more original, more unique, where it's not as easy for them to just copy and paste online to complete the assignment. So I want you to revisit that whole idea. Think about your assignments in that way. Would it be easy for them to just copy and paste online to complete your assignment? So I actually did paste the low probability of plagiarism information in January again in the Wiki, so that you can access that to review that information and think about that when you're making assignments and when we're thinking about the copyright of material. So we'll start out basic. What is copyright? So that first bullet point, copyright is a form of protection giving the creator of an original work the exclusive right to publish and distribute that work. That's the basic definition of copyright, but I'm going to go further into that as we go on. But I want you to know that copyright is automatic. As soon as you finish writing a short story, you have copyright on that short story. You don't have to register your short story through the U.S. Copyright Office, but you can. They suggest you do, just because if you register it through them, you then have a date when you registered it, your name attached to it. So there's actually some legal information out there that if anybody were to use your work and you took legal action against them, you would have a date saved in the U.S. Copyright Office of your work. Now, it doesn't cost too much to do that. There's a different range of prices, but it starts at $35 to register something with the U.S. Copyright Office. So it might be something you want to do. And then you should know how long copyright lasts. Copyright is not forever, but it kind of feels like that. Copyright lasts a long time. As a rule, for works created on or after January 1st, 1978, copyright lasts the lifetime of the author plus 70 years. I want to say that again. It's the lifetime of the author plus an additional 70 years. So if you think of that, any work that was created in your lifetime will not go out of copyright in your lifetime. Most likely, unless you live to be extremely old, most likely anything created in your lifetime is not going to go out of copyright in your lifetime. Copyright lasts a long time, but you should also know that it actually can be renewed too. Disney continually renews the copyright because before 1978, copyright was different. It's actually changed for many years. A long, long time ago, copyright used to just be 14 years long. So it's changed many, many times over the years, and the last iteration of that was in 1978. So now it is the lifetime plus 70 years. So copyright does last a long time. Now, once something is out of copyright, it enters the public domain, which means that you can access it freely and use it however you'd like without having to get permission from the creator. And we'll talk more about that as I go on here. So this is a list of things copyright protects, and I won't read this list to you, but it probably seems understandable to you. This is probably what you've thought of when it comes to copyright. Literary works, pictures, architectural works, and maps are also included. But you should really think of these things broadly, because things like literary works actually can include things like computer software. So they had to make, the more technology advances, they have to make more room for things like that in copyright. So it can include things like computer software. So this probably includes a lot of things that you were thinking of when it comes to copyright. And there's other things that you might be thinking of that are not included under copyright. So works that have not been fixed in a tangible form of expression are not included in copyright. So I want you to think of things like, choreographic works that have not been noted or recorded, or improvisational speeches that are not recorded or written down. A lot of those things may not be covered by copyright. And then things like titles or names or short phrases, they're not covered under copyright, but they may be covered under trademark law. And then bullet point number 3, ideas or procedures or devices. Those types of things aren't covered under copyright either, but they may be covered under patent law. But the last one is the one that might really mean a lot to you. This is works consisting entirely of information that's common property and contains no original authorship. And so things like calendars, the standard calendar. We know my birthday's in February, on February 24th, and we know what day of the week February 24th will be for many years now. We know this. We can go out year after year after year, and I will know what day of the week my birthday lands on. That's common knowledge. I can't copyright that. Something like, when JFK was assassinated on 11/22/63. That's common knowledge. We can't copyright that, but Stephen King can write a book about 11/22/63 and even title the book 11/22/63, but he wrote the book about the assassination and it was a creative work, so his work is going to be copyrighted, but the basic fact that he may have used in his work about JFK being assassinated on that day, that basic fact can't be copyrighted. So I want you to think of things like that. Those basic facts, things like that can't be copyrighted. That's something that nobody can own, because that is just a fact that we all have known to be true. So that can't be copyrighted. Another thing that can't be copyrighted is your citing of Elvis. You all know I love Elvis Presley and I try to work him in whenever I can. But this is actually on the U.S. Copyright Office FAQ page. It literally says your citing of Elvis. So they must have had a question of this at some point. So your citing of Elvis cannot be copyrighted, and the whole idea is something that you see cannot be copyrighted. However, if you took a picture of Elvis, a video of Elvis, you wrote a story about seeing Elvis, all of those types of things can be copyrighted. So this whole idea is just something that you see can't be copyrighted unless you have it fixed in a tangible form. Okay, so now when it comes to copyright, one thing that you hear often in education is fair use. So fair use is the reproduction of some of a work without asking permission from the copyright holder, which may be considered fair use when used for. So you can use some of a work without asking for permission when it comes to these 5 different things. So news reporting. When we're watching the news, they can play part of a video or read part of a speech or show pictures if they are reporting on those things. So you've all seen that watching the news. They don't have to go ask for permission to show a picture of something if that picture is depicting what the news report is about. Another thing is parody, and I want you to think of Weird Al when you think of parody. Most people know who Weird Al is. He's the one who takes popular songs and then changes all the lyrics to them and makes videos. So he took things like, let's see, I can't even think of a song. He took things like Michael Jackson's bad, and he turned it into the song Fat. So Michael Jackson, Am I Bad? Or I'm Bad, and Weird Al's was I'm Fat, I'm Fat. So Weird Al, you probably know him, you probably have better examples of his songs, but you want to think of Weird Al when you think of parody. That's probably the best way to describe it, that he has transformed the work into something completely different to parody the work. There's also criticism and comment, and this is like when you are writing a blog post and you're commenting upon something, you may need to quote a part of it or show a part of the video. If it is you commenting or criticizing this on your blog or in a paper, you just may need to quote or put this somewhere so that people understand what you're referring to. And of course, you always want to cite where you got it in that thing, but you definitely want to look at criticism comment as being part of fair use, that you can post some things if you are commenting upon them. The same comes for teaching. If you're using examples of things in teaching, you can use examples share them with your class in order to prove something, prove a point, show an example when it comes to teaching a lesson plan. And then there is scholarship and research, and this is basically when you're kind of publishing something too. When you're commenting upon something, you might need to quote it in your publication, just like criticism and comment, but if you are going to then publish this somewhere, you still can quote that without asking for permission, as long as it fulfills part of your research, part of the scholarship. So these are the different areas of fair use. But it still can be hard for people to maybe understand if what they're doing will fit under fair use. So there are these factors that you need to consider when you are trying to figure out if something is fair use or not. So the first factor, the purpose and character of the use. Are you using it in education, or are you using it for creative use? Or is what you're creating transformative? Are you taking something and making it into something completely new? Or are you taking it and basically just kind of copying it? So what is the purpose and character of your use? The nature of the copyrighted work is basically what is the item you're using. Is this a factual item, or is it a creative item? You have a better chance if something is more factual than if it is a creative item. So like if you have an article that was about 11/22/63, that was a factual, giving you the facts that happened in the day, you'd have a better chance of using some of that than you would Stephen King's book. So that's his book as a creative work. So you'd have a better chance with something more factual. The amount of the work that is used. Are you copying the whole thing or just part of it? I want you to think of kind of less is more with this. So how much of the work you're using? Are you do you want the students to read a book, but your library doesn't have enough copies for all the students, so you make a copy of the whole book for all your students? That would definitely not be acceptable. But is there one chapter of the book that you want the students to read and there's not enough books to go around? Could you copy one chapter for the students? Yes, much more likely that would be considered fair use. So think of the amount that you're using. And then the effect of the use upon the market value of the copyrighted work. So this is basically, is your reproduction or use of the work taking away from the market value of the author? So the previous example I used, if you copied the whole book and gave it to all 25 students in your class, does that take upon the market value of the copyrighted work? And most definitely, that is 25 books that they would not have sold to your library. Now, one chapter, would that take apart the market value? Probably not, because it's just one chapter of the book. It's not giving the whole book to someone. If someone wanted to know what happens in the whole book, they couldn't get it just from your one chapter, and they may then go and purchase the whole book. So it's most likely not taking away from it, but a whole book, yes. So think about the market value. Is it taking away from the original author, creator of the work? Now, one thing about fair use that's hard is that it's really not an exact science. There's nothing saying this is right, this is wrong. It's not exact like that. You have to take those 4 factors and try to determine if your use is fair use. And here's a kind of a recent example of how it's not an exact science. Fair use is really an arguable defense. And there's a recent example of this. You might have seen or read about Goldie Blocks. Goldie Blocks created, they are a company that makes kind of engineering toys that are designed more for girls, with girls in mind. But anybody, of course, can use them, but they're designed with girls in mind because the creator didn't think there were enough, engineering toys, science toys that were really kind of marketed to girls. So the creator has a lot of different toys. So you can Google Goldie Blocks and you can find the website and see the toys that are out there. But they made a video that kind of went viral. Millions of people watched this video within the span of a week, probably a couple days actually. And they used a Beastie Boys song. So this is really the story of Goldie Blocks versus the three MCs from the Beastie Boys. Goldie Blocks used the song Girls, and they rewrote all the lyrics just like Weird Al did. So one would think this would be more parody. But the Beastie Boys questioned and said, well, you're actually using this to sell your product, and you still have our chorus there. The chorus just basically says girls, goes over and over again and says girls. So it's really only one word in the chorus, but all the music was the same, although they re-recorded it with different artists. But then they changed all the other lyrics. But Beastie Boys said, no, we don't think this is right. We don't think this is a fair use. And Goldie Blocks argued that it was fair use. And this never went to court. Goldie Blocks got rid of the song and recorded a different song over the video. So you actually can't find the original video that Goldie Blocks did with the Beastie Boys song. But this was an example that got brought up that a lot of people said, well, isn't this parody? And the Beastie Boys kept saying, no, it's not parody. So even though it seemed like parody to many people, this most likely, if they would have kept it, would most likely have gone to court, and they would have had to argue whether or not it was. And so they would have had to use the 4 factors of fair use, and a judge would have decided whether or not this was fair use or not. So fair use is not exact. We say, I want you to think of parody and Weird Al, and then this happens, and the Beastie Boys says, no way, this is for commercial purposes, they're trying to sell their products, and that's our song. So this might have gone to court had they kept the song in the video. So fair use is really an arguable defense. And things go in front of judges all the time, and they kind of change what we think about fair use. So we're really going to talk about fair use. We have actually a bunch of fair use scenarios we're going to talk about when we meet. And we're going to ask you, what do you think? And we may not have an exact answer for the scenario we have, but we're going to talk it through and see, well, what do you all think? So I want you to just think it's really not black and white. But you have to think of these 4 factors when you're trying to determine whether or not something you're doing is going to be considered fair use. And you need to hit all of these factors. So the Beastie Boys were claiming Goldie Blocks did not hit all 4 factors, and Goldie Blocks said, I think we did. So you have to hit all 4 factors in order for something to be considered fair use. But it's really not black and white. And there are often guidelines set up to help you with fair use, but any guidelines that are set up by outside organizations, not by copyright law, they are not a part of copyright law. But there are some that might be able to help you though. So I have a couple of examples of some websites that might help you determine if what you're doing is fair use. And one is just this simple website from Lewis Library at LaGrange University, and they just have this simple basically table where you have the factors you need to consider and whether it's possibly fair use or whether you probably need permission. So it's kind of a good chart to go through and think about the work that you're doing and see which column does my use of this item fit under. There's another website. This is actually from the University of Minnesota. It's called Thinking Through Fair Use, and it's a tool you can use where you can actually check boxes next to what you're doing. You can see they have factor number 1, the purpose and the character of your use. If it's favoring fair use, you can see it says favoring fair use. It's educational, scholarly. Things that weigh against fair use are things like commercial activity. So you would go through this whole tool and kind of check the boxes based upon your use of the item, and then at the end it would tell you whether or not it was favoring fair use or weighing against fair use. And you can see both of those tools don't make a matter-of-fact statement that says this is for sure fair use or this is for sure not fair use. They say things like favoring fair use, weighs against fair use, because again, fair use is not black and white. It can be argued and has been argued many, many times. So now, what is the public domain? So the public domain is content that is no longer owned or controlled by anyone. These are items that are out of copyright. So you can use these items, adapt these items, distribute these items. You basically can use them for any purpose that you'd like without having to get permission from the copyright owner. They're in the public domain. So here's some examples of this. So a few years ago, we got the book Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and then not long after that, we got a graphic novel of Pride and Prejudice. And the reason we got both of those two things is that Pride and Prejudice is out of copyright. Pride and Prejudice is not under copyright any longer, so you can get Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. And after Pride and Prejudice and Zombies came out and the success of it, you saw many different other books that were in the public domain get made. There was Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters, and many others. And you can actually see at the bottom of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, it says by Jane Austen and Seth Grahame-Smith. So his name's included, but hers is as well, because a lot of her work is used, but zombies are thrown in. Another example is Natalie Merchant's album. This was from a few years ago. It was called Leave Your Sleep. It was a 2-CD album, 2-disc album. And all of the songs were originally poems. The poems were originally published in, I believe it was the 19th century, the late 19th century. And she took all these poems that she found and she added them to music. And so all the poems were in the public domain, but she added them to music. Now, I will say all of these works that you're looking at in front of you, all of these things are in copyright now. You can't take Natalie Merchant's songs and do whatever you want with them. She changed them. She used the poems and put them to music. So she has changed that poem, and now her song is completely under copyright, as well as Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and Pride and Prejudice the graphic novel. Those things are under copyright, so don't think you can go grab the things that you're looking at here and use them, because you can't. Those are under copyright now. But they used, when they made this new item, they used things originally that were in the public domain. So Pride and Prejudice is still in the public domain. The poems that Natalie Merchant used, they're all still in the public domain, but the way they transformed them into these items are now under copyright. And that brings us to the Creative Commons. So the Creative Commons, some people think copyright is too restrictive. Some people want to have people use their pictures and build upon their pictures. So what Creative Commons does is that it allows you to put free licenses on your work, making it easier for you to share and allow other people to build upon your work without having to ask your permission. So this is all about you still have the copyright of your work, but if you're okay with people using your work without asking your permission, then throw a Creative Commons license on your work. So when someone sees that, they can read the license and determine how they can use it. And there are multiple different licenses. Every license will include attribution, but then it may include a variety of one of these other things. Share alike, what that means is if you see a license that has share alike on it, it means you can take their item, but whatever you create, you have to also share the same way they did. So if you took someone's picture and you transformed the picture into something new, if they had share alike on the picture, whatever you created, you also have to share alike. Non-commercial means that people cannot use it commercially. So if I make something and I think it's okay that educators use it within the classroom, but I don't want anyone else to make money using it, I would throw non-commercial onto it. And then no derivative works means basically you can allow people to copy, distribute, and display your work, but they can't change it at all. They need to keep it verbatim. They cannot make any changes to your work. So that's basically if you just want people to say, yes, use my stuff, use it within your classroom, share it with your students, but please don't change it at all. Then you'd add no derivative works to it. So what these licenses then look like will look like something like this. So at the top, there's still those 4 different items that can appear in a license, and then down below is what you might see with some of them. So what you might see if somebody wants you to not use their work commercially and to share it, not change it, no derivatives, is you'd see this one down here in the bottom, that they have to attribute it to you, but they can't use it commercially and they can't change it. So that's the license you would add if you really just wanted to share your work. But if you wanted people to do whatever they wanted with the work, then you might just put attribution. You might just say, go ahead and use it however you'd like, commercially, non-commercially, change it, keep it as it is, but just please attribute that originally you got it from me. Then you just have to put attribution on there. So basically, if you're searching for things with these licenses, you're basically looking for something that you can use without having to go through the process of trying to ask for permission. So you want to look for this type of license all over, and one place that you may have seen this is on our Millie Wiki. On the very bottom of our Millie Wiki, we have an attribution non-commercial license. So basically, you can take all the information on the Millie Wiki, you can change it up, you can give it to people, you can distribute it, you can do your own training, but we don't want you to use it commercially. We don't want you to profit from this, and we want you just to say you originally got it from us. So that's what our license means. So you'll see that in the bottom of our work. But now that you know what these licenses are, you're going to see them more and more. So if you're looking at Flickr, looking at pictures in Flickr, Flickr looks a little bit differently than this does now, but if you scroll to the bottom of a Flickr page, you're still going to see the license. So this one has an attribution and share alike. If you're looking at blogs, you may be familiar with Cathy Schrock. Cathy Schrock is an educational technologist, and she speaks all over the place, and she has really great things on her website. And one thing that she has is a great video called 60 Tech Tips in 60 Minutes. And it's a really great video you might want to look at. And at the bottom of her video, she has a Creative Commons license. So hers means that you need to attribute it to her. You can't use it commercially, and you can't change it. So basically, she wants you, yes, share my stuff, but don't change it. Tell everyone you got it from me, and don't profit from it. So she has her information. So many things on her website have this Creative Commons license at the bottom of it. Now you can also search the Creative Commons. If you just go to search.creativecommons.org, it brings you to this page where you can search the Creative Commons. You choose what you're looking for down at the bottom. So if you're looking for images, you could choose Flickr and Photopedia, and then you'd enter your keyword here. And below the search bar, you would choose how you wanted to use this. If you wanted to use it commercially, you'd have to check the use commercially. And if you wanted to modify it, you'd have to check that box. But if you didn't, if you just want to find something you can share with students, you'd uncheck those boxes and you'd enter your search term and then pick which box that you're searching. And that's a way you can find things in the Creative Commons. I don't ever use Google Images. I know I hear people talk about using Google Image Search when they're making their PowerPoints. They want to find fun images to put in the back of their PowerPoint, so they use Google Image Search. And I never do that, because Google Image Search, it is so hard to determine who owns the copyright of that image. I never send students there. I don't use it. I don't recommend it to people. If I'm just using it for fun, for my own, just to look at something, sure. But if I'm going to use it to find images that I can use in things, no, I never use that. I will come to the Creative Commons search, or there's many websites out there where you can get images and many other things. And we compiled a huge list for you. We made the Millie Copyright Wiki. I linked this under January, and it's also linked on your homepage too in the wiki. And we just call it the Millie Copyright Wiki. And on here we have copyright FAQs, which just basically lets you know what is fair use, what's the public domain. But the one you probably really want to look at, or the few you want to look at, are copyright resources. This is where we have links to websites where you can learn more about copyright. You can find more help with fair use. And then copyright friendly materials. And that's where we have a huge list of different websites where you can get items that are in the public domain or that have Creative Commons licenses or that are just copyright friendly where they just say use all the items that are in this on this site. It's a great long list where you can get images, audio, video, tons of different things. So I highly recommend you check out our copyright friendly materials page. You also might want to check out our teaching tools and lesson plans page, because if you're going to talk about copyright to students, we have some lesson plans that might help you. And then we have two other pages that are out there. One is copyright scenarios and one is district copyright and plagiarism policies. What we want you to do is look at the scenarios and reply to them. And so it basically asks you, it tells you, a teacher wants to do this. Is this fair use? Yes or no? And we want to hear your replies. And we want to hear more than just if you think yes or no. We want to hear from you why. And we want you to look at some of those before we meet in person, because we're going to talk about copyright scenarios when we meet, so that you can get an idea. We want you to feel more empowered when you're using fair use. So we want to talk about those when we meet, but please look at and comment on some of those. And then I want you to think about, a lot of school districts have their own copyright and plagiarism policies. Do you know where your districts are? Does your district even have one? So what we want you to do is kind of search for it. Where is it? Where is the copyright policy for our district? Where is our plagiarism policy? If you can find it, if there's an online link to it, paste it for us. Or if you can copy and paste the text of it, if there's no link, copy and paste it. We want you all to know if your district does have these policies and what they are and where you find them. So before our meeting, I want you to look at all the things we have in the wiki under January. All of the stuff that I mentioned in this video, all of that is linked under January, and it's also linked under the copyright wiki. So I want you to explore the copyright wiki too, and then respond to at least 2 copyright scenarios. So go to the Millie copyright wiki, you'll find all the scenarios, and you can reply and let us know what you think about them. What do you think about that scenario? Was that fair use or not? And if you do all of these things before our in-person meeting, you'll be better off. Because we're not just going to talk at you about copyright, we're going to be really interactive in this session, and it's going to be really fun, and there may be prizes. So if you look at all of this stuff under January, and if you look at copyright scenarios before we meet, you'll be much better off for what we're going to do in person. So that was kind of a quick rundown of copyright and the Creative Commons, but know when we meet, we're going to do a lot more on this, so I hope you're prepared.